Well, it's Mark chapter 15 now, and the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, the elders, the scribes have gotten together in the dark of night, probably we believe about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., and they've had their mock trial. They have brought their witnesses before. They have accused Jesus of being the Son of God and claiming to be the Son of God, which Jesus did not deny, and so they have condemned him, they have convicted him of death. The problem is that in the Jewish custom at that time, or the Jewish law at that time, they had no ability under Roman authority to kill criminals. Now, this is interesting because there's always exceptions to every rule. And there's an exception to this because we know for sure later on in the book of Acts, we have this story of the stoning of Stephen, where the apostle Stephen was killed by the public through stoning. And so this was a public execution of someone they believed to be a heretic. So we know that the Jewish people had the ability, or the Jewish authorities sometimes bent the rules a little bit, and the Roman government turned to the other cheek and looked the other way as they carried out the death penalty, as they carried out murders in their customs. So we know that this is the case, but in this case it's different. In this case, the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, the leaders of the Jerusalem church politically knew that this was a hot button. They politically knew that they could get themselves in big trouble with the public if they crucified or killed Jesus, stoned him to death, or killed him publicly themselves. But if they could condemn him, if they could prove that he was a heretic and then take him to Pilate and think up some accusation that Pilate, as the governor of the area, would feel is warranting death, then they could, in essence, wash their hands. In essence, they could hand him over, give the responsibility of the crucifixion to Pilate. So if there was a political uprising, if there was a public outcry of why did this happen, the leaders of the church could say, well, it was the Romans that did it. Yes, we believe that he was a heretic. Yes, we believe that his claims were false, but, they're the ones that killed him. So in essence, they're passing the buck here. So this is, again, a political situation. And we've seen this over and over and over again in Mark's gospel, this understanding of the politicizing of our faith. The understanding of saying, how can I do what I want to do, but do it in a way that won't be seen by the public, won't be seen by the populace as something that is wrong or something that is bad. It's more about saving face than it is about doing what is right. And we've seen that over and over again in the Gospels. And this is not something that is unusual, because even in our day and age, still 2,000 years later, we struggle with the same things. We struggle with doing what is right as opposed to saving face. We struggle with being politically correct. We struggle with making sure that we don't do anything that causes a problem, as opposed to standing by the truth, or as opposed to make the right decision. And this is where the leaders of the Jerusalem church are. We know that they probably could have, in the dead of night, they probably could have stoned Jesus to death, and the Romans probably wouldn't have said anything. They wouldn't have turned or paid any attention to it. But they also knew that there's a possibility, because it was still an unknown. How would the people react? How would the people feel about Jesus being killed? Well, if they could have the Romans do it, then they could pass the buck and they could push it off. So they needed to take him to Pilate, the governor of the territory, so that he could be the one that would carry out the crucifixion, carry out the murder of Jesus. And that's where we pick up in chapter 15. We're going to be looking at Mark chapter 15, verses 1 through 15. Again, we're going to read down through it, and then we're going to come back and take a look at it. So let's listen to the word of the Lord. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in an uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked him. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Thanks be to God for the reading of that word. So let's go back and take a look at the scene as we've talking about. It's very early in the morning. It starts off in chapter 15 with those words, very early in the morning. This was customary. It was tradition in Jesus' day that the Roman authorities would get to work at dawn. It was not unusual to have trials that went on right at the first part of the day when the daylight was first happening. And one of the reasons why this happened is that the Roman authorities could get their work out of the way. And also, too, in the Roman times, verdicts were carried out swiftly. So if you were tried at sunrise and you were found to be crucified or to be killed, then you would be killed and executed that day. There wouldn't be this, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years waiting for the execution time to come. They came down with the verdict, they carried the verdict out. So it wasn't unusual that this was happening. It wasn't unusual that someone was being presented to the governor very early in the morning to be tried. And that's one of the reasons why the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, the leaders of the Jerusalem church met overnight so that they could get their ducks in a row and they could come to Pilate with already a formulated accusation. So very early in the morning, the chief priests and the elders and the teachers of the law and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. So in essence, again, this is now the passing of the buck. They wanted him dead, but they didn't want to kill him because they thought that there might be an uprising by the people. But if they handed him over to Pilate and the Romans crucified him, then they would have an out. They would be able to say to the crowd, "Hey, it wasn't us. It was the Romans." So they handed him over to Pilate, and Pilate again was the governor, who was the governor of the territory, and he was someone who reported directly to Caesar. Directly to the leader of the Roman Empire. So his responsibility was not only to govern the area, but his responsibility was to keep peace in the area. We have to remember that this area of Jerusalem and the nation of Israel was a thorn in the Roman side. It was an itty-bitty little area compared to the whole Roman Empire, but there was constant uprisings, there was constant riots, there was constant rebellion, and so it was this little place that was a thorn in the side. So Pilate was put there as governor for the reason to keep peace. Now Pilate, traditionally history has told us, was a very cruel man. He didn't have any problems or any qualms with killing people or doing whatever he needed to do to keep the peace. And that's why Caesar put him there, so that he could keep the peace in Israel. He could keep the peace in Jerusalem. So they bring him to Pilate. And Pilate asks him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Notice that question. Are you the king of the Jews? Do you have that in your translations? Yeah, it's "Are you the king of the Jews?" Not "Are you the Messiah?" "Are you the Savior?" "Are you God incarnate?" It is "Are you the king of the Jews?" And this is very important because when, as it said earlier, the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin, they made their plans. So they have come to terms in this nighttime trial. They've come to terms with Jesus must die because he claims to be the Messiah. He claims to be the Son of God. He claims to be the chosen one. And they don't believe him. So they've got to get him out. They want to crucify him. They want to kill him. So they say, we'll take him to the Romans so that the Romans will do it. So we'll politically cover our you-know-whats. And so they take him to Pilate. But if they take him to Pilate and say, our accusation against this man is that he says he's the Messiah, Pilate's going to say, who cares? If they come to Pilate and they say, our accusation against this man is that he says that he is God, Pilate's going to say, who cares? The Roman authority, the Roman government, the Roman world has so many other gods. One more is not going to hurt. So they have to think of an accusation to bring against him that Pilate would take seriously, that Pilate would be able to dig his teeth into and say, now we can find something to convict him of. So they make up this title, and basically when you think about it, it's really the first time it comes up in this gospel. They think up this title and they call Jesus the King of the Jews. They say the accusation is that he's walking around saying, I'm the King of the Jews. Well, this is a big no-no in the Roman Empire, because in the Roman Empire, there's only one king, and that's the emperor, that's Caesar. And so if someone claims to be king, then you're trying to usurp the power of Caesar. That's a no-no, that's punishable by death. So that's why they came and they brought Jesus to him, and they didn't say that he says he's the Savior. They didn't say he said that he's the Son of God. They didn't say that he says that he's God incarnate. They said that he's the King of the Jews. And so Pilate asked him the question, are you the King of the Jews? Asked Pilate. You have said so, Jesus replied. You have said so. Yes. He said, you have said. He didn't say yes. He says, you have said so. Look in your translations. Do you have that? You have said so? Yeah. Notice that he is merely affirming what Pilate just said. He's not casting an admittance of guilt. He's not saying, yes, you have said so. It just says, you have said so, Jesus replied. So in essence, if Jesus would have said yes, then Pilate would have been able to say, guilty, death, go. We're done, we're moving on. But he doesn't. He gives Pilate this rather perplexing response, and he says, you have said so. Well, of course he said so. The words just came out of his mouth. But also, too, you have said so, according to Roman law, opens up the trial to look for more evidence, because of the fact that he didn't admit guilt. So now guilt has to be proven. So he didn't come before Pilate and confess. So now they've got to prove that he is claiming that he's the King of the Jews. You have said so, Jesus replied. The chief priest accused him of many things in verse 3. The chief priest accused him of many things. So notice here, up to verse 1 and verse 2, the accusation was King of the Jews. Pilate directly asked Jesus, are you the King of the Jews? Jesus' response is not a response of admittance. It's not a response of confession. It is merely a response of a fact. You have said so. So now, once that happens, the chief priests are going, crap, we've got to figure out something else. So they start lobbing other charges out there. They start lobbing other charges towards him, because they know that now the King of the Jews piece is not sticking, because they're going to have to find witnesses that will corroborate that he said he's the King of the Jews, which they can't do. So they've thrown this out there now, and the chief priests accused him of many things. So, in verse 4, again Pilate asked him, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of. And so in essence, he comes to Jesus. He has this accusation in front of him. He claims to be the King of the Jews. He looks at him and he says, are you the King of the Jews? And Jesus says, you have said so. So in saying that, the trial opens up really. Now it's time for Pilate to do the due diligence and find corroborating evidence for this, so that he can prove that this is what he is saying, so that he can penalize him for that. Well, when the Jews see that happens, they know that they can't promote, or they can't bring forth any witnesses that can corroborate that testimony. So they've got to come up with other accusations. So they start lobbing other accusations out at him. And so when it says that the chief priests accused him of many other things, Pilate turns to Jesus and asks him and says, aren't you going to answer? Here you are. These people are accusing you of everything. That guy accused you of stealing his mama's dishes. You know, they're accusing you of everything they can think of, but you're not saying anything. You're not defending yourself. And he says, again, Pilate asks him, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of. So all of these accusations are being lobbed at Jesus, and he just stays silent. He just stays right there, and he doesn't say anything. He stays quiet, kind of like he did the night before with the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law. He said, see how many things they are accusing you of. But, in verse 5, but Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Do you have that in your translations? Pilate was amazed. Yeah, Pilate was not amazed that Jesus didn't know how to speak. Pilate was amazed at the situation. In essence, by this time, now remember, this is just past dawn. By this time now, Pilate's sitting back going, okay, I think I'm getting what's happening here. You, for some reason, have ticked the leaders off. They want to get rid of you, but they can't do it politically. They can't do it on their own. So they've brought you to me so that I can do it, and they can get away with it and blame me for it. So he's not amazed at Jesus necessarily. He's amazed at the whole situation. Pilate's an outsider looking in. He is someone that probably knows or has heard about this prophet because he's been the governor and he's been around. But he's not one that's following Jesus. He's not one that would be a God-fearer. He's merely someone there as a strong arm of the Roman Empire to keep the peace. And now he's amazed at the situation because he's figuring out, he's a smart guy. He's figuring out that this guy hasn't really done anything, and these leaders over here don't like him, and they want him dead, but they can't do it, they legally and politically can't do it on their own, so they want him to do it. So he's amazed at the situation. But Jesus still made no reply. So Jesus didn't argue back. Jesus didn't stand up and say they are wrong. He just simply stood there and let them hurl all of their accusations at him without any reply. Again, a reference back to the passage in Isaiah where the sheep is led to the slaughter. And so he has no reply, and Pilate was amazed. So in verse 6, now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. Every year at the Passover, the governor of the Roman Empire that was positioned over Jerusalem would release one prisoner at the Passover. Because remember, the Passover festival is a festival where they celebrated the remembrance of the freedom from slavery in Egypt. So in order for the Roman government to honor that, they knew the story, so they allowed one prisoner to be set free. So they gave one prisoner freedom, and it was the custom that they would do it every year at the Passover. Obviously now, very early Friday morning, this is the Passover celebration, and they have not done it yet, so it hasn't happened this week. So now Pilate sees a perfect opportunity here. He sees a way for him to get out. The leaders of the Jerusalem church, the Jewish religion, they want Jesus dead. They can't politically or technically, legally do it themselves. So they bring him to Pilate so that he can do it and they can be off the hook. So they can claim no responsibility for it. Now, Pilate's realizing that this is all a dupe. Pilate's realizing that there's nothing to these charges. So he now sees an out for him to get out, and that is that he's allowed to release one prisoner. But notice the caveat of the prisoner release. Listen, now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. You have that in your translations? Whom the people requested. Very important concept. At this point, Pilate cannot just pick randomly a prisoner and release. The prisoner has to be requested for by the people. So here's how Pilate's mind is working. He's saying to himself, the Jewish leaders don't like this guy and they want him dead. I wonder how the people are, because really it's no skin off my teeth if I kill this guy or don't kill this guy. The problem will be is if I kill this guy and it causes a riot, or vice versa, if I don't kill this guy and it causes a riot. I don't want a riot. That's the one thing that Pilate wanted to avoid, because that would bring fire and wrath from the emperor down upon him, and that's the last thing that he wants. So he's trying to keep the peace. So he's trying to figure out what's the best way I can get out of this, what's the best way I can do something right, because I know this guy hasn't done anything wrong. How can I do something right but still politically cover my tush? And so he's thinking, here's the perfect way, because if the leaders want him gone, but the people don't want him gone, then I can wash my hands of the whole thing. Then I can be done, and I can I can push the responsibility off on them. He can say, well, the people wanted him released, so he's going to release him. So this is he's kind of playing this hand. He's putting his cards down here, hoping that the people would be the ones that would want him released over and above the Jewish authorities. Now, it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. And now we get some background on one of the prisoners that's up for this possible freedom. Verse 7, a man called Barabbas, which, by the way, Barabbas means son of the father. Son of the father. That's going to be important, so remember that. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists. The insurrectionists. You have insurrectionists in your translations? Yeah, basically insurrectionist is another term, a way we can translate that word is terrorist. So this is someone who despised the Roman authorities. This is someone who banded together with other people, and they carried out acts of terrorism trying to get the Romans out. And so he was an insurrectionist, and he was arrested. So a man called Barabbas, which means son of the father, was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. So there was an uprising that happened recently. A group of people came against the Roman authorities. They got arrested and they got thrown in prison. So the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. So he knew that this was a custom. He was thinking this is a possible out. He has basically two choices here. He has this Jesus that's standing in front of him, which he knows deep down is innocent of what he's been accused of. This is a political thing. This is something because the leaders don't like him. And you've got Barabbas, who in his opinion is probably the scum of the earth and someone that he wouldn't want to set free because he's an insurrectionist, he's a terrorist, but he sees the possibility of being able to avoid this whole thing if he just gets the crowd to release Jesus. And so basically the crowd comes to him at this point and says, do for us what you always do during this time. Do for us what is custom, as it says. As it says here, the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. And so now he's got this opportunity. Okay, this is good. I can release Jesus and they will accept it, and I can be done with this whole situation. I can move on with my day. Verse 9, do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Asked Pilate. So he uses his title that they're accusing him of as opposed to his name. So basically the people have said, do for us what you were customary of doing at this time, release a prisoner. And so he says, great, would you like me to release this Jesus? Would you like me to release this King of the Jews to you? Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Asked Pilate. Verse 10, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him. So now we see the full realization that Pilate has. Pilate sees right through this. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows that the leaders don't like Jesus for whatever reason, and he really doesn't care about the reason. He just knows that this guy is not worthy of death. This guy hasn't done anything that warrants a crucifixion. He just knows that they have it out for him. So he goes for this opportunity for him to be saved of this whole thing. And so he says, would you rather me hand over to you the King of the Jews? Would you like me to give you the King of the Jews? Knowing that it is out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to them. In verse 11, But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. So as the crowd was asking the question, the chief priests, the elders, the scribes, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees were all working the crowd. And they're saying, hey, not Jesus, Barabbas, we want Barabbas. And Barabbas, there's a possibility, could have been slightly popular with the people because of the fact that he was an insurrectionist. He was someone that was fighting against Rome, and deep down, every single one of the Jews didn't want Rome to control them. Yeah, some of them used the controlling of Rome to their political advantage, and they enjoyed that benefit, but deep down as human beings, as people in the nation of Israel, they wanted their freedom, they wanted their sovereignty. And so when they looked at Barabbas, there's a piece of them that said, I kind of like that. I'm kind of glad that he was doing that, because if we keep stirring up problems, maybe they'll leave us alone, they'll get rid of us. So they're able to use that little hook, that little grain of sand, that they could get in there and they could get the crowd on their side. So it says, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him, but the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. So they were wanting Barabbas instead of Jesus, so they went around and planted that seed in people's hearts. No, ask for Barabbas. Ask for Barabbas. Barabbas is our guy. We've got big plans. Ask for Barabbas. And so, what shall I do, in verse 12, then, with the one you call the King of the Jews? Pilate asked him. So they're basically saying, no, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. And so Pilate is saying, okay, if I let Barabbas go, then what am I supposed to do with this guy? Basically, this guy is innocent. This guy hasn't done anything wrong. This guy is just the victim of your leadership's cruel intentions. What am I going to do with him? And that's exactly what he says in verse 12. What shall I do then with the one you call the King of the Jews? Pilate asked him. Crucify him, they shouted. Crucify him, they shouted. Verse 13. Now this is incredible to think about, because this is Friday morning. All right. Now remember, rewind back to Sunday. Rewind back to Sunday. I know it's hard because that was many weeks ago, but if you rewind back to Sunday, not even a week before, Jesus came down the Mount of Olives on a donkey, and the people were spreading their cloaks on the road. They were waving their palm branches. They were shouting Hosanna. They were celebrating the coming Messiah. That was Sunday. It's now Friday, and those very same people are now yelling, crucify him. We are a very fickle bunch, us human beings. Our opinions change. The public opinion of things changed like a wave crashing on the beach. They have changed their whole perspective. They were celebrating the coming of the Messiah. They were saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord on Sunday. On Friday, they're saying, crucify him. Crucify him, they shouted. Verse 14, why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. And here is the governor of the Roman Empire looking at the people saying, you're saying crucify him, and I'm telling you why. I'm saying to you, why do you want me to crucify? He's done nothing wrong. Why? What crime has he committed? What has this man truly done that warrants a legal punishment of death by the Roman Empire? What has he done? Do they answer that question that he asks in verse 14? Look, but they all shouted the louder, crucify him. So they didn't give any reason. When Pilate says, why, what crime has he committed? They didn't say, oh, he's committed the crime of heresy, or he's committed the crime of saying that he's God, or he's committed the crime of whatever the case may be, being a false prophet. They didn't say that. They just went right back to the crucify him. So remember, Pilate's responsibility as the governor of Jerusalem is that he is supposed to keep down any insurrections. He needs to keep this place peaceful because the Israelites had been a thorn in the Roman government's side with all of their insurrection, with all of the zealots that are constantly battling against the Roman Empire, trying to get them out. And so he needs to keep peace. That's his number one goal. In fact, probably, even though we weren't there, probably Caesar's direction to Pilate when he was positioned there was basically saying, I don't care what you do, just don't ever let them rebel again. I don't care what you do. Don't let there be any more riots. I'm sick of hearing about Jerusalem. I'm sick of hearing about the Israelites. I want them just quieted. And so that's his main responsibility. So he needs to do whatever he needs to do to keep these riots down. He needs to do whatever he needs to do to keep the zealots quiet, to keep the insurrectionists, the terrorists from carrying out their schemes. And so they're yelling, crucify him. So here is Pilate in this situation. He knows in his heart that Jesus is not guilty of what they're accusing him of. He knows in his heart that the chief priests, the elders, the scribes, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law have something against Jesus. He doesn't know what, has something against Jesus, and they want him done. They want him gone, but they're not going to do it themselves. They want him to do it so that they can be off the hook. And so this is the situation he's in. Combine that with the fact that he has the voice of Caesar, the voice of the emperor in his mind saying, you better keep the peace. If you don't keep the peace, then I'm going to kill you. And so he's saying it's either me or Jesus. Because I think based on what he's seeing, that people yelling, crucify him, he's saying, if I don't crucify him, if I do make the right and just decision to say this man's not guilty and release him, then there's going to be an insurrection. There is going to be a riot. There is going to be trouble, and that's going to bring trouble to Pilate. So in essence, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And he's stuck between this notion of saying, I know what is right, but I also know what I have to do in order to save my skin. That constant political battle that we are in every single day. I know what is right, but I know politically what's correct, what I need to do. And so those two things come crashing head on. And here Pilate is stuck in that situation. He wants to release Jesus, but the people are saying crucify him. So if he crucifies him, then he's not going to have any riot, but he knows he's crucifying an innocent man. But if he doesn't crucify him, there's going to be a riot, and that means Caesar's going to come down on him, and it probably will mean the end of his life. And so he's got this decision to make. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Crucify him. Verse 15, wanting to satisfy the crowd. Look at that. Do you have that in your translation? Yeah, wanting to satisfy the crowd. Not wanting to do what is right. Not wanting to do what is just. But wanting to satisfy the crowd, this is the political battle that Pilate's in. That's the political battle that you and I are in all the time. Doing what was right as opposed to doing what will satisfy the crowd. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them, so he let the insurrectionists go, and he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. So he carried out that which the crowd was demanding. He carried out that which what the chief priests, the elders, the scribes, the Sanhedrin were demanding, and that was that Jesus would be killed. And he knows that this is the politically correct thing to do, even though he knows in his heart of hearts that it's not the right thing to do. And that's our battle, isn't it? Today, you will encounter something in your life where you will have to make a decision between what is right and what is just and what is true and what is politically correct, what will save your skin. And each and every single one of us come to those crossroads. And sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we make the right choice. Sometimes we take the high road. And sometimes we don't. And the point here is not to beat yourself up over the fact that you fail at this sometimes, but is for us to understand that this is a reality. And for us to have the presence of mind in those times to stop and to think and to say, what am I doing? What's going on here? For us to use our intellect, the brain that God has given us, the heart that God has given us, to examine a situation and make a decision in that moment. Now, not to say that that decision will always be easy, and not to say that you will get that decision right all the time, but taking the time to think about it, taking the time to acknowledge it, to recognize it, to grab a hold of what is real and what is actually happening will help as we take step after step after step towards the right direction. Taking the step towards moving away from doing something that will politically save our skins all the time, or politically what the crowd wants or what the majority wants, to saying, I'm going to do what's right. That was Pilate's battle, and that's our battle. Well, that's it for this week. We will pick up next week in verse 16 of chapter 15 of the Gospel of Mark. We're getting down near the end. There's 16 chapters in the Gospel of Mark. So I pray that you tune in next week. If you found a blessing in this, I pray that you share this Bible study with someone else, because you never know. It just might be the very thing they need to hear. So until we get together again next time, stay safe and stay sane.